and gentlemen, the 3 knockdown rule is in effect. I'm Steve Kim, and Mario, our first show of 2020.
That's why I was waiting for Mario Baby New Year Lopez. Dang,
Baby
come
New
on,
Year.
man. You missed opportunity. Justin Buffalo on the 1s and 2 knuckles.
What's up,
man?
Before we look ahead, we look back. The last quote-unquote major fight card in America took place December 28th at the State Farm Arena in Atlanta on Showtime. And the new WBA 135-pound regular version, at least, that champion is now Gervonta Tank Davis, runs through Yuriorkis Gamboa, takes 12 rounds. Mario, was this fight, it didn't feel like a tribute to Tank, but it almost felt like an indictment. I mean, I felt it was going to be a 6-7 round fight. Kid shows up a couple hours late to the weigh-in, doesn't make the weight. He looks sluggish. What do you make of that performance?
Incredibly disappointing, and I'd be slightly concerned, not panicked, if I was Tank's handlers. Look, like you, I thought he was going to make pretty quick work of him, considering Gamboa is, what, 40 at least? Or getting nearing?
He's about 38.
Okay, but he's been around, and he's been dropped, I don't know, countless times, and it was a perfect opponent for him to look outstanding against, right? To have a real showcase fight. But what ended up happening was all these questions ended up being raised, and you start to kind of, or at least I did, start to question, wow, is Tank as focused as we thought? Is he? Because here's the thing, I actually like the kid. Every time they interview him, he seems pretty soft-spoken, seems like a nice kid, and he appears to have his act together. But when he shows up, like you said, late, overweight, looking sluggish and tired towards the end of the fight, then you're like, that's clearly not the case. And look, he is, I think, a naturally gifted fighter. He's got that great pop. However, I think it was a little muted going up to the weight class. It wasn't as devastating as it was. I think that was one thing that was kind of glaring to me. And the reflexes, of course, are second to none. But when you have Gamboa, for the reasons that I just said, he's older, he's been a little shop worn.
Blew a flat tire also.
And well, I was just going to get to that. And then clearly got hurt. First I thought it was a shoe. Then he got hurt in the first round. I thought, okay, that's it. It's going to be over maybe the next round, right? The fact that he ended up going almost the distance was, I thought, a bad look
It's an indictment.
for Tank. And just to pause on the injury, I thought that got a little blown out of proportion. There is no way, and I'm speaking from experience, that Gamboa tore his Achilles, then proceeded to hop around for the next 12 rounds. That is a flat-out lie to make him look a little braver than what he is. He had maybe sprain, maybe...
but it's not a complete rupture.
Of course not, because you cannot even stand, much less, I don't care what adrenaline is rushing, it's just impossible. And I know, because I've done it. So that, they need to calm down there. It was still impressive that he was able to almost go the distance. But again, I walked away going, wow. I used to think, Teofimo and Tank are the two young blue chip prospects that I would love to see in a major showdown later on. Don't know who would win that. Now I'm thinking, if they're continuing down the same paths, if I'm Tank, I wouldn't want any part of Teofimo.
You know what discipline is? Ray Lewis had the greatest example or definition. It's what you do when no one's watching.
Mm-hmm.
And Gervonta Davis, last time I checked, I don't think works the graveyard shift at the factory. He's not a bank teller. He
balloons up during fights.
He's not going to graduate school. What's he doing? Be a pro. And the other issue is now...
He's at the tattoo shop.
He's more inked up than the Washington Post, okay? But now they're talking about making him a pay-per-view star. Now, look, he's a draw in several cities. That has to be given credit. Television ratings for Showtime, he's actually pretty good by their standards. But now you're going to say, well, we want to fight Leo Santa Cruz. Well, here's the problem with that logistically. I was at Leo Santa Snooze's last fight. Boring, and he didn't look like a 130-pounder. Gervonta nearly didn't make weight, moving up to 135. Where are they going to meet? That fight just does not seem to make sense, and I just wonder, is it a smaller version of Errol Spence against Mikey Garcia? That's what it kind of feels like.
Yeah, I get that's a perfect, again, theoretically on paper, opponent for him. He's going to come right at you, stand right in front of you. Yeah. He should, quote,
smaller
shine.
Guy, yeah,
he should shine, but who knows? If he takes the approach that he did this last time, Santa Cruz goes up for him, might actually turn out to be a good scrap. It's not what I want to see.
Leo Santa Cruz's punches, based on what I saw at 130, it would be like throwing marshmallows at a tank.
You're exactly right.
It would never dissuade Gervonta, and it would become Tiananmen Square.
And in the flip side of that, I immediately thought too, wow, what would a Burchelt, who obviously is not as fundamentally sound maybe as Tank, but man, those are some heavy hands. That leather's flying. He comes in shape, and he's got mean intentions.
That pace.
Now that's where a real fight that you don't want any part of.
So we'll see what the future holds for Gervonta Davis. And again, I'd like to see in a couple weeks since that fight happened, what's he been up to? Has he hit a treadmill? Has he even gotten into the gym? Again, you have one job.
It's crazy talk.
Also, the Carmelo Anthony Award for 2019 has to go to Jean Pascal. What a renaissance he had last year. I remember watching this fight at your house. We went to the movies. We saw one of the last HBO broadcasts. When Dimitri Bivol blanked Pascal, we said, okay, Pascal's washed up. It was over. All of a sudden, that victory by Bivol has a whole new value because Jean Pascal in 2019 has upset the apple cart, handing Marcus Brown his first loss, and then beating a very game, gutty version of Badou Jack.
I sat by Jean Pascal, coincidentally, at the Canelo Kovalev fight, right? That dude, we just talked about Tank, what's he doing between fights? Jean Pascal does not stay out of shape.
No.
That dude's always in shape. That brother's built. And good for him. You know, because he had obviously that devastating loss with Kovalev and then with Bivol, like you said. But man, he stayed disciplined. We were talking about that. That's the polar opposite. He stayed disciplined. He works hard. That was a fun fight. So yeah, I'm happy for guys that pay their dues and stick around long enough. They get to see some success.
Jean Pascal's right hand is like the Jack in the Box. It just springs out of nowhere.
He's got that looping punch. It's dangerous. You don't see the angle where it's coming from.
You think he's just kind of like languishing, and all of a sudden that right hand, as you said, it's not straight down the pipe. It arcs.
It comes over the top.
Right,
yeah,
and if you back away with your hands down and your chin's not tucked in,
bad news.
He's literally turned the tide of his last two fights against younger guys with like 5 or 6 punches. He remains very, very dangerous.
But with that said, Badou Jack, another guy who I really like.
I thought he may have won the fight.
I thought the fight. I thought the fight. Honestly, at the end, should have been a draw. That to me, that was a perfect definition of a draw. I'm not angry. Pascal got the nod for the reasons discussed, but Badou Jack's another guy, coincidentally, that puts in the hard work, always comes prepared. He's been at the wrong end of a lot of these decisions, and he even took the loss like a real gentleman too. So that's a guy I'm cheering for. I would have liked to have seen a draw just because I felt that's what was deserved for both fighters.
The 12th round knockdown, I said, I think this goes to Badou. Badou's like that marathon runner, and like miles 12, 13, and 14, you're like, can you pick up the pace a little bit?
Yeah,
because he has a strong finishing kick,
right.
But he always leaves himself with that doubt where you're kind of leaving it up to judges.
I know.
You don't know what they always see. Final card on the world-class boxing scene was New Year's Eve in Japan, and Kosei Tanaka and Kazuto Ioka both defended their titles successfully, so they move on to 2020. Mario, I love Twitter. There's a lot of clapping back, as the kids say. Look, I don't know if they're ever going to fight in the ring, but Terence Crawford and Errol Spence put on a show last Sunday. I enjoyed that. I hope it actually translates to get this a real fight.
You like Twitter beef. I hope so, too. I don't know realistically if it'll happen this year, to be honest, because of the accident. I was more optimistic prior to the accident. I think a lot's going to depend on how Spence looks in his first fight post-accident.
Whenever that is. Right.
Whenever that is. That's exactly it.
I found it interesting. The next Monday morning, Errol Spence obviously must have gone to bed, and he must have picked up his phone and had all these interactions. And he must have said, I got some counter tweets to shoot off here. And it came to a point where Terence Crawford said, okay, you say that I wish I just call you. Be on your phone. I'm going to call you. And then Terence came back 10 minutes later and said, you know what? Errol's a cool guy. We talked. We both agreed it's going to happen. And I'm like, could this be the internet version of when Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather met at that Miami Heat game? Remember, they just happened to be at the same game and they shook hands?
I hope so. I think it's at the point now where it could be lucrative for both of them, and if they wait any longer, that's a tough division. Yeah. They could upset the apple cart and cost them both money.
Terence is not the most talkative guy. I do believe in the last couple of weeks.
On Twitter he is.
No, exactly. I believe he's made a concerted effort because he's heard everything from various people, and he says, you know what? I may not want to do a lot of interviews because I'm not comfortable with it. I'm not Bernard Hopkins. But messaging is important in this day and age. You've got to say something. I don't think the silence was golden with him.
Right.
And what I've noticed is, in terms of the comments, a lot of people are saying, you know what? I used to think it was Terence's fault. now Errol's got to kind of say, wait a minute, I'm not just saying the whole wrong side of the street. Act like a fighter.
Yeah.
Take the fight when he's healthy, though. But big news this morning. It was announced by Top Rank that the forecast calls for the Tartan Tornado. They have signed Josh Taylor, unified 140-pound titleist.
Wow.
Bob Arum says he's going to make his debut sometime in the spring. Could be in the
huge.
UK. And it greases the skids for a 4-way unification later in the year with Jose Ramirez.
And you know what? I apologize because I don't, and I really wanted to, I don't recall us giving Josh Taylor the appropriate amount of love in our year-end wrap-up.
And he deserved it.
And he totally deserved it. I think he's the best 140-pounder on the planet.
So do I.
I really do. And he was involved in one of the fights of the year with Regis Prograis. And I like Prograis too. And both those guys, I even liked him more afterwards.
Yeah.
And they handled like gentlemen. But what a fight in two young champions, undefeated, facing each other. That's what else do you want in the sport? That's all you want. So he should have gotten a little bit more love. That's huge news with Top Rank because they know how to build a star.
Yeah, and I will say this, though. Everyone that's penciling in the Jose Ramirez-Victor Postal fight, I saw Postal a couple days ago at Wildcard. He's in great shape, and he's always been a difficult out. I would not just take that for granted.
Oh, no, that's not
that Jose Ramirez
no.
is going to retain his belt.
He's got to work for all his dubs.
Mario, let's take a look at some of the upcoming fights that have been announced. February 14th. You don't have to be my Valentine, but I'll see you at Honda Center. Ryan Garcia takes on Francisco Fonseca. Jorge Linares takes on Carlos Morales. I have to tell you, if there's ever a fighter that you wanted to headline on Valentine's Day, it's got to be Ryan Garcia. Isn't this perfect?
So stupid. Your little boy crush.
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
Also, February 29th, I've got to give the Zone and Matchroom credit. I love this card at the Star in Frisco. We all know that Mikey Garcia, going back up to welterweight, takes on Jesse Vargas. But WBC flyweight champion Julio Cesar Martinez is coming right back against Jay Harris. And the word is, a lot of reports, that Roman Gonzalez could be taking on WBA 150-pound champion Cal Yafai.
Oh.
So top to bottom, that's a great card. And also, Abel Sanchez tells me that would-be heavyweight Murat Gassiev will make his heavyweight debut. March 14th is being reported by our very own Dandy Dan Raphael that since Shakur Stevenson may not get Josh Warrington right off the bat in a featherweight unification, that he could be facing Miguel Mariaga in March in a title defense before taking on Warrington. And Mario, we've talked about this for about a year or two. Gennady Golovkin is now at SNAC. He's getting off the mountain. He's doing the simulated altitude training under the direction of a man that we know well,
Wow.
Victor Conte. Your thoughts?
I like it. I think he literally needed a change of scenery and pace. Even though he wasn't with Abel Sanchez anymore, I think he needed to get out of Big Bear. So I like it. Who are you hearing he might be facing?
He's going to be facing this guy named Szczmeta, Polish guy, IBF mandatory. He's a huge favorite. In a way, look, this is a placeholder fight. I know people are grumbling about it. I see why he's making a lot of money. Look, I believe that last fight with Derevyanchenko was very, very alarming. For the first time, he really looked 37. It's one thing to labor against Canelo, but even with Canelo, he kind of closed hard in that fight.
Right.
Against Derevyanchenko, when I'm there ringside, I said to myself, wow, he does look 37 going on 42. Now he's under the direction of Victor Conte. This is what he had to say about his newest client who's up there now in San Carlos.
We started a 10-day pre-camp training here today in the Bay Area. He'll be here for about 10 days training with the SNAC team, and then he's got to go to some sort of a sponsorship commitment that he has in Europe, and we'll see what happens thereafter. But we had a great day of training today, and we're excited to have him here at the SNAC facility.
So it's interesting. How do you think how receptive is he to this training based on one day? What can you tell me?
Well, he's going to be doing things much differently than he did before when he was training up at Big Bear. When we took him into the SNAC altitude dome, I explained to him that, he can go to Big Bear without leaving San Carlos. Mm-hmm. And we all laughed. So we have, low oxygen, or simulated high altitude equipment here at SNAC. So we certainly use that and gain the benefits, but he gets to sleep in his own bed here at sea level and get a deep and restful sleep, and which is very helpful in terms of his recovery.
Victor, you've spoken about this in the past, but what don't you like about the high-altitude Big Bear training that Golovkin had done in general in the past?
It causes sleep disturbance.
Mm-hmm.
It will cause your heart rate to go up 10 to 15 beats a minute. So you do not get a deep and restful sleep at high altitude. That's why you can use it, low oxygen, and together with high-intensity training, but you've got to do so at sea level. At altitude, your high exertion is about 85% of what it is at sea level. So we get all the benefits of training at high altitude, and we use the altitude dome, and we use masks with low oxygen. We have the heavy bag on a non-motorized treadmill to battle ropes. Many different types of training drills are done with low oxygen or simulated high altitude, but at the same time, he gets to go and sleep and get a deep and restful sleep here at sea level. That's what's wrong with the whole concept of training at high altitude, is it makes you slower, it makes you weaker, it reduces the size of your muscles. Living and training at high altitude is not something that I would recommend for any boxer.
Mario, do you agree with me, though? The last couple of rounds and just how beat up Golovkin looked, that he looked himself in the mirror, literally and figuratively, and said, I got to change this.
Yeah, look, you're not going to beat Father Time, but you got to do whatever you can to at least stave him off a little bit. And I think that's a good move. And I would venture to say maybe another year or two for Golovkin's prime earning power, if that, maybe 2-3 fights at the most. Is that ambitious?
Think that's all remember, he signed, I believe, a 6-fight deal with the Zone. That's 2 fights a year, so he's already got 2 in. I believe, this is my prediction right now, as Kim Stradamus looks into the crystal ball.
Say Kim Stradamus.
He will fight Canelo Alvarez at 168. So he needs to start making changes with his body.
Right.
And, you heard the interview and you heard the comments of Mr. Conte. He has said for years that high-altitude training has its benefits, but there's also a very negative effect to your body, okay? And I don't know, but you know what? There's no such thing, really, unless you're Ponce de Leon, as a fountain of youth. 37's 37. Can you actually turn back the clock?
Right.
That's
and remember, he had 300 some odd fights prior to that.
So there's a lot of mileage. It's like that new car that still has, 80 miles on the odometer,
exactly.
80,000. Mario, I talked to Eric Gomez. It looks like he will be coming back in his customary Cinco de Mayo weekend, May 2nd. I spoke to Eric Gomez about what could be taking place with their number one client in 2020.
I mean, I personally feel that that's the weight class where he's going to be the best at this point of his career. I think that's the weight class that he is going to feel the best, strongest. But it doesn't necessarily mean that he won't go back to light heavyweight. I mean, he still has that possibility of going back to light heavyweight. Giving the title up, yes, it was. It was about the weight, but it wasn't all just about the weight. The WBO sent us a letter about having to make a decision whether he wanted to stay at 75 or at 68, because in their rules, you cannot keep you can't keep a title in 2 weight classes. Mm-hmm. And that's a rule that the WBO has. So that, part of giving up, it wasn't necessarily just because it was light heavyweight and he wanted to go to a different weight class. It's because he had to make a decision. So he decided to vacate the title.
With that said, Eric, if he lands at 68, I mean, is it natural to assume that Callum Smith or Billy Joe Saunders would be leading candidates to face Alvarez in May?
We're not ruling out anybody. Everybody, even at 60. Whether he wants to go back at 60 or if there's any of the champions that want to move up to face him, we're not ruling anything out. He's in a special position at this point in his career where he can fight pretty much anybody from 60 to 75. And there's guys that can move up or down. He's in that rare air that Oscar was in, that Floyd was in, Pacquiao. He can do different things.
So Mario, my belief is his days at 160 are over. He's going to fight at 168.
Or whatever weight he chooses.
Canelo weight. Who would you like to see him face?
Well, I was speaking with Eric too, and Canelo wants Billy Joe Saunders, which I like. I actually like
You
that
like
fight.
that?
I do like that fight.
You know what's funny about that?
You know why?
I did a Twitter poll. Who would you like to see him face?
Yeah.
Billy Joe by a smidge. I was stunned because that's the most boring style.
But
Isn't it?
Here's the thing. I think it makes for a good event too. Especially if they were to do it in the UK and that atmosphere. I don't know if Canelo is married to wanting to be in Vegas. I know financially probably makes the most sense for him, but I think he's at the point now because he obviously does well financially that he wants big events. And
Wants to branch out.
Yeah, wants to branch out. Well, he went all the way over to Saudi Arabia to see Andy Ruiz, so that would be a big one. They'd fill out the O2 Arena.
So in other
right?
words, he's
And
already locally known. Now wants to be internationally
wants to be
respected.
international, and that what a notch to his belt just continues.
No,
to
that
add
would be
to
great for his branding.
All
It would.
that's a great look for his Hall of Fame career.
That's interesting because if you look at the guys outside of Golovkin, which is different, the two guys that really troubled him were Lara and Trout.
Yeah.
All right, outside of the skin tone, Billy Joe Saunders, southpaw, high boxing IQ, can move a little bit. That seems to me counterintuitive. Like, what fight should Canelo take? But you know what? The way I look at it, Canelo was such a big name that he could fight a broom handle or move. It'd be a big event.
Yeah.
So I give him credit because I thought Callum Smith looked very vulnerable against John, not an easy rider.
Right.
I think he'd actually stop Callum Smith based on what I saw. Billy Joe, look, he was boring Joe Sanders at the Staples Center a couple months ago, but level of motivation.
Sure.
I mean, for that guy, he probably trained 3 days. For this fight, he trained 3 hard months.
And I think he'd be very competitive, and he's a style that that doesn't suit him perfectly. So he likes to challenge himself. He'd be training really hard himself.
Another update from Bob Arum. I spoke to him right before we went on the air. There's a lot of talk that Artur Beterbiev, because of his religious beliefs, he is Muslim, would not go to China. That company had won the purse bid against his mandatory. Looks to me, I've been told that company that won the purse bid defaulted on it. Arum says March 28th in Quebec City will now be where Beterbiev's title defense will take place on one of the ESPN platforms.
Nice.
Speaking of that, there are fights this weekend. Saturday, ESPN from Atlantic City, New Jersey. Pivotal light heavyweight bout between 2 perennial contenders. Jesse Hart takes on Joe Smith in a super middleweight battle between Steve Nelson and Chem Killick. Also, highly touted Puerto Rican prospect. I believe this kid's a blue chipper. Mario Xander Zayas will be on that card on the ESPN Plus portion. And then Saturday night from San Antonio, Texas, we go into the zone. Jaime Munguia takes on Spike O'Sullivan. I spoke to Eric Morales last week, and this is his second camp with Munguia. And I said to him, what are you trying to change? And he said something that reminded me of you. You always said there was a method to Morales' madness.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you know what? It's not just about him being more aggressive. And I said, really? He says, it's about him changing pace on his punches, having one punch lead to another, changing angles, and being accurate. Because I don't want him just to throw punches and say that's Mexican style. No.
Right.
We want these punches placed in certain areas at certain times, at different speeds and tempo. And I was like,
What a brilliant philosophy from Morales. And he's exactly right. And that's how he fought.
Yeah.
He's exactly right. And that's a great approach with Munguia.
Yeah, because anyone can just theoretically throw punches.
Exactly.
Right. But
that makes me excited to hear
the
that.
one thing about Munguia last year, as he took on Takashi 6'9" in Noe, struggled. May have not beat Dennis Hogan. I thought he lost that fight. Against Patrick Olote, that was kind of a warm-up fight. I want to see what type of progress. I think Spike O'Sullivan is very favorable in terms of the type of style that he brings to the table.
That's going to be a TV-friendly fight.
Absolutely, or at least laptop-friendly. Friday night, Atlantic City on Showbox. Clarissa Shields headlines, but again, I want people to see one thing. Jaron Boots Ennis. If there is a blue-chip prospect that can rival Virgil Ortiz in terms of his upside and his ability, it is this young man from Philadelphia, Jaron Boots Ennis. Remember the name. That's the only reason why I'm watching that show on Friday night on Showbox. Quickly, let's go to the Ask Mario segment of the program here on the 3 knockdown rule. I got a lot of things to talk about. Let's take a look here as I go to my profile. Okay, here we go. Number 1. Hey, Mario and Nichols, do my Niners have what it takes to go all the way? Good playoff weekend last week.
Wow, well, beating Seattle and getting home field was huge. If they didn't, that would have been a much tougher road, obviously. But yeah, I think now they got to be feeling pretty good about it, right?
I'm very, very, very confident.
You know, Seattle won again too, though, huh?
Yeah,
Isn't
I mean,
that a
it's
trip?
destiny Niners Seattle championship game.
What if the Vikings were to show up again? Can you imagine?
They're
I
gonna
think
show
they're
up.
worn out. I think they're physically worn out.
Yeah,
That was a tough game.
Plus, you never know what you're going to get with those guys.
Yeah.
Like Kirk Cousins, 1 minute look like Tom Brady,
Yeah.
next
Also,
minute he
remember
looks
this.
like Philip Rivers.
We're talking about a team that plays in a dome that now has to go all the way to the other side of the country,
Right.
on the West Coast. Now they're playing on grass.
Yeah.
That's always a factor.
Sure,
We better
of
talk
course.
about that. That should be a well-rested Niner
Am
team.
I crazy to think that Tennessee Titans might put up actually a good fight?
Yes.
I think they'll play well.
If-
They run the ball so good,
dude,
they
they're
can
running the
control
ball
clock.
so well. That defense looked really
Yeah.
good, right? They don't
Yeah.
commit mistakes.
Dude.
One of the ways you keep an offense from being great, make them sit on the bench. And with that 22-wheeler, Henry,
Dude, Henry had 182
And
yards.
Lamar's gotten a lot better, but he's played one playoff game and
Yeah.
he was terrible in it.
And he lost to the
He
Chargers.
lost to the Chargers. You know, doesn't mean nothing, but we'll
Right?
see.
Tennessee? Like, you never know.
Yeah.
here's one from Arturo Martinez. If 135 has all these names, Loma, Haney, Tank, Lopez, Linares, Garcia, and Rolando Romero, why are they not fighting between them? Well, wait a minute. First of all, Lopez and Linares, I think they're going to fight by the middle of the year, according to Golden Boy, right? That
Right,
fight's a
that's-
fait accompli.
that's the plan.
And Bob Arum reiterated. Now, it might be in May now.
You mean Garcia and Linares?
Yes, Garcia and Linares. As it relates to Lomachenko and Teofimo Lopez, Bob says that fight may now be in May, not April.
Oh, wow.
Also,
The Cinco de Mayo
the Middle East is a factor because you got to satisfy both sides. Money talks.
Ooh,
So there's a
do
lot
what
of
you gotta do.
logistics that still have to be worked out. Here's one from Brad White. Forbes had 2 boxers, Mayweather number 1, Pacquiao number 8, on their 10 highest paid athletes of the last decade. Do you see any boxers being on the list in the next decade? If so, who? Oh, the 2 names. Anthony Joshua and Canelo.
Mm-hmm.
I think those guys make a lot of money, absolutely. And Clay Stevenson asked, hey, Mario, which fighters or fighter on the Golden Boy roster that Oscar has, or do you think is most excited in terms of what Oscar's perspective is? Like, who do you talk to him? Who does he say, wow, that's our next kid?
I think he's really high on Virgil Ortiz right now. And I think they're going to try to move him rather quickly. And Virgil, as a matter of fact, I was talking to Oscar. It's funny. You know who he wants eventually? Errol Spence. They're both from Dallas.
Yes, they are.
Okay, and they used to be in the same gym.
Yes, they are,
And,
yeah.
and apparently, he didn't like his attitude towards
Really?
some stuff. Yeah, I'm cleaning it up right here. So there could be a little history, and he actually wants him. So if you got a young, precocious kid like that, wanting a big fight like that,
Wow, that
from the
would-
same hometown,
You could have that at Cowboy Stadium.
that'd be good.
You know, if you look at the WBA ratings, Golden Boy's now doing business with the BA. My view is they're going to start to choose certain guys to move up the ladder in that weight class. You know who they want to fight, though, by the end of the year, and they think they're ready? Keith Thurman. Because Thurman, I believe, is number 1 or is right up there in the WBA despite the loss to Manny Pacquiao. By the way, what is going on with Manny Pacquiao? I keep trying to get answers. There's no dance partners right now.
All I could say is, and I think I posted something the other day, he's the only champion to have a major championship belt in 4 different decades.
That'll never be done again.
Dude, that is unbelievable if you think about it, right? The 90s, the O's, the 10s, and now in
I
times.
mean, you need to have perfect timing, and you need to be great. It's unbelievable.
Right. And
It
a
is.
major one, not just like a little trinket. That you got to automatically put him in the Mount Rushmore for that, right? Of all
That
time,
right there is another notch on the belt.
I mean, right?
Absolutely.
But that's substantial. That's unbelievable.
Adam Fahey, who does Ask Mario see as Canelo's biggest threat, and at what weight would he like to see Canelo fighting at?
Well, if he stuck around at 175, I think Beterbiev would be a very, very tough fight. That'd probably be his toughest, just because I think Beterbiev, not only incredibly well schooled and sound fundamentally, but he packs a punch, and he's the same type of fighter that would stand right in front of you and it'd be tit for tat. And he's just, I think, a naturally bigger man, stronger man.
I think you're asking a great fighter to do a little bit too much. One of my fights of 2020 that I wanted at 168, and I don't know if you can make it politically, Benavidez.
Oh, I would love that fight. But I'm talking about, I think he actually would have more of a chance against Benavidez than he would Beterbiev, though.
Agreed.
I think
Size matters.
Yeah, he does.
And strength.
Beterbiev he got those hands. I mean, he's 6 feet and
When he
solid
was hitting Gavozic late,
Right.
hammering the nail ringside,
Yes.
you could feel the
Right.
punches from ringside. That's
And-
when you know a guy hits hard.
And you know he's a guy that walks around at like 200, comes down to 175.
Yes.
That means a lot.
Moving on to final flurries. Mario, we went to go see Star Wars.
Oh, dude.
We
were both
Look, we're not Star
underwhelmed.
Wars nerds. We're fans, so we're not going to be. But there's too many moments I'm like, huh.
and we were in those cushy, comfortable seats.
That was the best part.
That was, you know,
the recliners.
yeah, the
Yeah,
recliners,
I love those.
right here at Universal.
Yeah.
I was underwhelmed, and you know why? Specifically, because The Mandalorian was so good. I think I was expecting too much. Mandalorian's so good.
As
It's like
someone
it's like a western.
Who had a lot of water before coming to your house and had to pee for like an hour. That movie was about 45 minutes too long. And I don't know. Look, I'm not one of those people that's going to say it's the worst movie ever. But to me, I don't know if you agree, Mario. The first 3 Star Wars that came out in 77 through, 83, that'll always be Star Wars to me.
Of course.
The rest of this stuff is just...
They should let Jon Favreau do it.
It's a money grab.
Because he did the Mandalorian. They should have let him run with it. Now it's like, I'm over it.
Now, Mario, big news. You have a very hectic schedule. You have to get running here in about 90 seconds. What's going on with your schedule right now in terms of Saved by the Bell?
We're doing table reads, what it's called. Like you read the scripts, always gather around. We start shooting next week, as a matter of fact.
Is everyone involved?
I don't know how much I can
And I don't
talk
mean
about
Bob
it right now.
Golick.
You know,
I don't mean Bob Golick.
about-
Nothing against Bob
What
Golick.
about
College
not
years,
it.
What about your boy Belding?
Yes.
What about
Yeah,
your boy
you
Belding?
need Belding.
I think they told me I'm not supposed to be talking about everything. There's people. I think you'll be happy. I think you'll be happy. We'll see.
All right, well, that's it for this week's edition of the 3 Knockdown Rule. On behalf of Mario Lopez and Justin Buffalo Knuckles, this is Steve Kim saying adios.